Now we are going to take user inputs and send it to backend. So we are going to make API calls. And to make this API call, we are going to use another library, Axios. Let's install that. So killing the test console here. Now installing this Axios, and this is going to be regular dependency. It's not going to be development dependency. So we will run npm install, or shorter way, just Axios. Whenever we add new dependency, we need to stop our test console or running application, then start once again. So here I'm going to run tests once again. By the way, I'm committing each of these changes in each lecture. Jest is running the test based on the diff in the commits. And since from last commit there is nothing changed in our application, it is not running any test. To run all the tests, here it is showing what to do. Press A to run all tests, and I'm going to do that now. Hitting A, and now it is running all the tests. Now let's add our test. I'm just copying this test. We are going to fill the form, and we are going to make an API call. So let's update the test description. It sends username, email, and password to backend after clicking the button. So let's also get the inputs for this. Is going to be for username, and the label is username, and this is for email, and the label is e-mail. Now let's fill the form, just like filling the password input and the password repeat input. We will be filling username and email inputs, and let's say username will be something like this one, user1, and the email will be user1@mail.com. Then we will click to this button, and we will be using this user event again. So we will await user event. We are going to click, and we will click to this button. Now in our application, we will be making API call after this click action, and that is going to be triggering an HTTP request to be sent to our backend application. But in tests, we cannot rely on to a real HTTP request going to backend. If we forget to start the backend, then the tests will fail. But that doesn't mean we have problem with our application implementation. So to get consistent test result, instead of relying to an external service like this backend for this case, we will mock the behavior. Jest is providing the mock functionality. So let's create a mock function first. But let's make sure we do this before clicking the button. So here, let's have a function. Let's call this one as mock fn, and we create a mock function like this, just fn. For the backend API call, we are going to use the Axios. So we are going to replace the Axios functionality, but first let's import Axios from this Axios package we just installed. We are going to send this form data in a post request. Axios has post function, so we are going to override this post function with our mock function. So when the test is running, this Axios post function will be replaced with this one. So after we click the button, we can use this mock function to check how this function is called, what type of data it is receiving. So we can do our assertion, and we can check if it is having the username, email, and password fields in it. So after clicking the button, first we need to get what is the request body we are receiving, and we can do that by using this mock fn. It has mock property, and in this mock property we have call history. So this calls is containing all the call history for this function. So in one test we can call the same mock function multiple times, so that's why it is keeping all the history. But since we are clicking this button only one time, we expect this mock function to be called only one time. So in this calls array we will get the first call, and let's say this is first call, and this is basically how we are calling this Axios post function. So in our component we will call Axios post with first one is the URL. Here it is showing this is URL. Then the second one is going to be request body object. So we will get the body from this first call by checking the second attribute. The first one is the URL. The first one, the index 0 is URL, and the second one is the request body. And we expect this body to be equal to an object like this one. It will have username field, and it will contain the value of user1, and we will have email, and it's going to be user1@mail.com, and it will have the password, which will be having this value P for double S word. These are the values we are typing right here. So we are rendering sign up page, filling the inputs with the values, clicking this button, and because of the actual post functionality is mocked with this jest function, we are able to get the values from that mock function, and we are comparing this value, this body, this request is being made with this object. So let's save this. This is failing because we are not able to get the first call, because this mock function is never get called. We are not using Axios post in our component yet. So let's fix this. First, we will have a function to be run after clicking this sign up button. So let's define that function here first. Let's say this is going to be a submit function, and in this function we will make the API request. So first let's import the Axios in this component too. So we will get Axios from Axios, and here we will be calling Axios post, and the first parameter is the path, and we are going to send our request to API 10 users. So the backend is responding to this request, and the second parameter is the object. So we will have an object here. Currently we are having the value for the password and password repeat, but we also need the value for the username and email. So first let's have corresponding variables for them. So we will have username and email here, and we will be assigning the values with this bind value of this input. So we will bind the value of this username input to our username variable, and same thing for email input. So we will bind the value to our email variable here. And since we are storing the values here, now we can create our object, again using the object shorthand create functionality and adding the username. So this is going to be adding username property and assign the username variable value to it, and we will have email and password. The function is ready, but we need to call this function with this click event. So just like we were listening for the on input for the input fields, now for the button we are react on click event, and whenever this button is clicked we are going to call this submit function. So let's save this, and the test is passing. Now let's also test this one on browser, opening the developer tools and opening the network tab here, clearing this one. Now filling the form A, B, C, C, and clicking sign up. Here we are sending this request to API 10 users, and we have this body having the email, password, and username, but it is receiving this 404 response because currently the request is going to the rollup. So the request is going to this localhost 5000, and we don't have this endpoint, so it is returning 404 back. We will get back to that part later. Now we are filling the form and clicking the button, but if we hit enter at this point, it is not doing anything. It is not submitting the request. Now, to be able to use the enter key for submit, let's wrap our elements with form. So here, adding the form here and moving this form elements in it, saving this one. Now we are having this error printed in the console, but the tests are passing. Now let's try it on browser. So the developer tools is opened, filling the form once again, typing same letter and hitting enter. Here the page is reloaded, and let's try it one more time with preserve logs, clearing the logs, filling the form and hitting enter. Here it is sending a request to this endpoint, but also page is reloaded. So when a form is submitted, browser is also processing this form submission, and that is triggering this page reload. We can fix this action by taking the event. So whenever we click the button, it is triggering an event, just like the input events. This is triggering the event for the click, and in this submit function we can call event prevent default. Browser was handling the submit event. Now we are preventing it, so that whenever we hit enter, it's not going to be reloading the page. Saving this one, and the error is gone. And let's go to network tab once again, clearing these logs and filling the form, hitting enter. Here we are seeing just this request and the page is not reloaded. So basically we are modifying the behavior of that event. Alternatively, Svelte is providing us the option to use those modifiers like this one, this prevent default, in this on-click assignment part. Instead of doing like this, we can type like this on click and pipe, and after the pipe we can say prevent the default. Now we don't need this one, we don't need to take the event as a parameter. Saving it. Again, we don't see any error in the console logs, and if we try to send the request from browser, hitting enter, again it's not reloading the page. So this is also working, and the console error log is gone. So the Svelte is offering this event modifiers, and we can set them in line when we are listening for these events. We have implemented the API call logic and using Axios for that. But we don't need that library. There is a built-in API in browsers, fetch, and we can do the same request with that one. Let's do that. So just not focus to the test for this one for now. We are just going to see how the fetch is working. So just commenting out this Axios import and commenting out this Axios post usage here in the submit function. Now we are going to run fetch. Again, this is a built-in functionality in browsers. And we will be calling the endpoint. The first parameter is the endpoint we are making our request, the API 10 users. And unlike Axios, we have to define the method we are using in the second parameter, and which is object. And in this one, we will tell we want the method to be post, and we want the header to be added to this one, and the header is going to be content type. We are going to send JSON, so we have to specify that we are sending JSON by adding this application /JSON. So there will be content type header in this request, and it will be having this value. And as a request body, here we will add the body property, and we are going to give this object, but we have to convert this object to a string first, and we do that by running JSON stringify, and we pass this object to it. So that's how the fetch is working. So saving this one. So the test is failing because our test is directly correlated with Axios, and since we are not using Axios, our test is broken now. And also here in this console log, we are seeing this fetch is not defined message, because our test is running in Node.js environment. Our component is rendered in the test, it is rendered in JS DOM. So it is not really browser. We will resolve that part too, but let's try this on browser first. So opening the console again, clearing this previous logs, filling the form, clicking sign up. Here it is sending this request, and if we check the body, here we have the request body we are sending. So from browser perspective, nothing is broken. We are seeing the same behavior. We are able to send our request with correct body. So this is confirming our test is faulty. When our tests are dealing with the internal implementations, like in this one, we are mocking the Axios dependency, they became brittle and easy to fail after refactoring. Now let's fix our test implementation. First, let's make sure the fetch will be available in Node.js. So we do that by installing another dependency. So running npm I install, and this is going to be development dependency. So with -d, the package name is wg-fetch. Now let's run the tests once again. Again, there's nothing changed in our project, so hitting A to run all tests, and here the test is still failing. Now we are going to import this dependency in our test. Let's import this wg-fetch, saving it. The test is still failing, but we no longer see that fetch is not defined error. Now the problem is our implementation here was this mock function was mocking the Axios post. Now we are using the fetch of the browser, and instead of mocking this Axios, we can mock the window. Window is the browser, and it has the fetch, and we can mock that fetch functionality. We are using that fetch right here. And there is also another change here. We were checking the second element for the request body, and we were receiving an object, but this time we need to get the second parameter, which will be having body in it, and the content of this body is stringified version. We need to convert it to JSON first, so it's going to be something like this. First, let's get the first call. Then in this first calls, the second parameter having a body, and this body is stringified JSON object. So we are going to make it JSON with the JSON parse. So we are taking this object like this. We are getting the first call, we are getting the second parameter, it has an object, and in this object we have the body, and we are parsing that value to JSON so that we can use it in this expect part. Saving this one, and here we see the test is passing. The mocking is a useful technique to make our test to run in a predictable environment, but as we can see here, it is directly related to our internal implementation. Like here we switch from Axios to fetch and our test failed. But on the other hand, from user point of view in browser, nothing is changed. The scenario is working as expected. So we must be creating our test as close as possible to real user interactions, and luckily for this case, instead of mocking the fetch or Axios, we can use a library which will be intercepting the requests which are actually going to target server. And with this interceptor, we can mimic the behavior of backend. And we are going to use this mock service worker for this. So first, let's install that library. Again, killing this console. Now running npm install. Again, this is for development dependency, so -d, and the package name is MSW. The package is installed, running the tests once again. Now let's update our test. First, let's import a function from this package MSW, and it has this node package in it, and we will import setup server function from this package. And let's go back to our test. Now, before our page is rendered, let's create a server here. So we will have a server, and we will be creating the server by running the setup server. And this setup server is taking request handlers, and we are going to add a REST handler. And let's import another function from this MSW, and that is REST. So we are going to have a REST endpoint which will be handling post requests, and the first parameter is the path, so it is going to be handling the request coming to the API 10 users, and the second parameter is the request handler part, and creating an arrow function here for this one. It is taking three parameters: request, response, and context. And here we can return a response, and we can set context status to be 200 OK. So basically this is going to be returning back 200 OK whenever we are sending a request to this endpoint. We have this server instance, and before rendering the page. Let's make sure this server is running in listening mode. Then we are going to check what this server is receiving. Since in this test we are checking the request body sent to backend with this mock functionality, we can get the request body received in this handler. So let's say we will have a variable called as request body here, and we will fill that variable with the actual value with the request.body. So whenever this endpoint receives the request, we can get the actual request body object from this rec and assign it to our request body variable here. Now this part is important. First, let's get rid of these mock functions. We are not using them anymore, and we are not going to have the first call or the body. Now we are going to check request body to be equal to this object. But the important part is, after clicking this button, the next line is immediately run. But that doesn't mean this request is reached here and this request body has the value we are looking for. So as a workaround, we will run server close here. We are going to wait for this server close. Until that time, the request would be received and the request body is assigned to this request body variable. So here in the expect part, we can expect this request body to equal to this object. Saving this, and here we can see the test is passing. So with this way, in our test, we don't care about the implementation details of our application. Let's confirm that. Let's replace the fetch with Axios again. So here in our component, let's import Axios, let's call Axios post, and let's remove this fetch. Saving this one. And here we see the test is passing. So again, the mocking is a very good technique in scenarios where external services are taking place. With mocking, we are able to create a reliable test environment, but the downside of it, our tests are being highly coupled with our implementation. So if we can avoid mocking, then we should be avoiding it. And this MSW library is great replacement for backend in client tests. I will be using Axios in the project, so let's remove the package wg fetch. So in console, running npm uninstall wg fetch.